What's going on, guys? It's Boots, and I'm back here with another, actually my first Division video, another video for the channel. But I want to do a quick video here to give my opinion on the state of the game. And the reason I want to give my opinion is because I watch a lot of videos on YouTube. Anyone that knows me knows I spend quite a bit of time on YouTube, and I've been watching a couple of the big, I guess, Division guys. There's a handful of them out there. You have Marco, you have Like Butter, you have Darius P. Wids is another one. I don't know if a lot of people have heard of Wids, more so because he's a PC player. Like Butter's a PC player. A lot of the guys are PC players, but he's a little bit less. Anyway, that's not the point. Point being, I've watched a lot of videos on these guys. I watched the state of the game when it comes out, and I want to give my opinion on what I think is wrong with the game. Not to say that any of those guys are wrong about what they say. I agree with most of everything they say as far as what they feel like is wrong with the game. But I personally think that there are two very fundamental problems that cause a lot of other problems. And I'm going to try to explain those both as best as I can. And the reason I want to make this video is simply because I'm not a big YouTuber, I'm not a streamer or anything of that nature. I'm starting to get into the YouTube thing, but I'm not a big deal, obviously. But I'm a casual player. I'm a big fan of the game, but I don't have as many hours as those guys do. And so I think coming from someone who plays it passingly, especially now in the current state. I think hearing that opinion from someone of that level, instead of going into like the overly complicated details that some of these guys do, I think what you need is to simplify it all and to really look at what's causing the problem. And like I said, I think there's two very fundamental issues with the game. The first of them, and they go hand in hand. And they don't really need to be in particular order, but I'm just going to talk about these two things. The first thing that I think is the biggest problem is that you don't get the best gear in the Dark Zone. And here's what I mean by that. Yes, if you're in DZ6 with a strong group of 4, you can rack up some pretty nice gear in a fairly short amount of time. That is the obvious. But for people like myself who play solo quite a bit, DZ6, anything I'd say from DZ4 on up to 6 is pretty much suicide. When it comes to the NPCs, it's pretty much suicide. Anything below DZ3, you don't get the best gear. You get 182, 204 drops, and for the gear, you get 214 or like 229 yellows. If you're lucky. Every now and then you get a 268 gear drop and a 229 weapon, but it's so rare that it really doesn't make much of a difference. And the same thing goes with supply drops. Every now and again you'll get a good one if you're in the lower DZ, but for the most part, if you want good gear, you have to go in DZ6. This is no surprise. This is nothing new. It's been that way since day one. The problem is, when the game was initially released, the Dark Zone was the way to get gear. Period. You could do missions, you go through the whole 1 through 30 experience, but once you got to the Dark Zone and you were able to survive there, that's where you got the best gear. You started to get yellow drops. And finally, you were able to put those purples away. But the thing was, those yellows didn't just fall every time you killed someone. Like, it was a big deal to get a yellow drop before 1.1. It was a big deal. And now, everywhere there's yellow drops, everywhere there's green drops. So it doesn't, that frequency and that grind really isn't there anymore. Another thing is, after 1.1 came out, you started to get green drops in the Dark Zone, but they were rare, and you were limited to the incursion. You could only get so many drops at a time, in a short amount of time. And if you were to go in the dark zone, as I said, the green drops or teal, whatever you want to call them, they were rare drops. Like, it wasn't like every boss you killed was dropping a teal. It was a big deal. And like, if you were in the dark zone back then to PvP and you got a teal drop off someone, like, you stopped everything you were doing to get that drop out, because again, those drops back then weren't a big deal. Now they're dropping left and right, and it's crap. So no one really cares. Here's the way I think it should be as far as gear goes, and drops and looting. First of all, you should get the best gear in the dark zone, and you do in a sense, but the effort it takes versus getting that gear elsewhere is not even worth it. You can go into Dragon's Nest and farm that over and over again, and you may not get the greatest drops, but you're going to get a lot of drops, and you can weed through those, and you can do them in such a short amount of time that it all adds up to be the same without the headache of going in the dark zone. And I'll get to the dark zone, and I'll get back to that in a second. But again, you should be able to get the best gear in the dark zone. I personally think a way to fix this is to limit the gear that you can use in the dark zone, which would then bring back the sense of urgency to actually rank up. I remember when the game was initially released, and anyone that knows me and that plays the game with me and has played with me since day one knows that I felt like I was being left behind because of the fact that in reality you were. If you weren't playing the game and you weren't in the dark zone getting gear, you weren't getting better, period. And now you can put the game down for a month, and for example, this is the first I've played this game put in the background. I've played in probably a week and a half, extensively anyway, but you don't lose any progress. And I think that's a problem with this being an RPG. Now, if there's supposed to be an in-game, like a max level, so to speak, then that's fine. But I don't see that because there's so many different builds. There's so much that goes into this game that I don't see you ever reaching a point where you just can't get any better. But the problem is, to get better takes no time at all. And I think that is a very, very major problem in the division. And I think you could solve that, or at least I think one aspect of solving that would be making your dark zone rank matter like it used to, because it used to matter. You could only use certain gear at a certain level. You can only get certain gear at a certain level, and so forth and so on. And that just isn't the case anymore. Perhaps you have, from rank 80 to 99, you can start using 268 gear, but until you reach rank 80, you have to use 240. And let's say, I don't know, from 50 to 80, you have to use 214 or 240, and then anything below 50, you have to use 214 gear, or whatever the case may be. But I think there should be some sort of tiers to the gear and the weapons. Personal opinion, again, this whole video obviously is my personal opinion, but I think that is a big problem in a dark zone. The reason it's a problem, and this is going to get into the second half of the video, but the reason it's a problem is because since the best gear isn't in the dark zone, anyone who's actually looking for gear is not in the dark zone. I won't say no one, but the vast majority of the people that are in the dark zone are not there to get gear. If there are, they're usually solo. And those people are very newer players usually, and it's impossible. And for me as a solo player, the majority of the time, like, playing solo is just, at this point, is a nightmare. It just is what it is. That's no secret as well, but that's just the reality of the situation. But no one is in the dark zone to get gear anymore. They're there to PvP, which is fine, but it brings out all of the players that were there to get gear now are going to do incursions, do HVTs. Granted, you only get Lone Star, but they're available. doing heroic missions, etc., etc. But they're not in the Dark Zone. They're underground. They're doing all these other things besides going into the Dark Zone to get gear. So what happens is anyone that is in the Dark Zone to get gear usually isn't ready for PvP. But they run into players who only want to PvP because those guys are maxed out on gear. And you have this clashing of personalities, I guess. And it causes a lot of problems. It makes people not want to play the game because newer people may think, well, this is all it is. I don't want to be a part of that. Older, players that have grinded it out like myself and my friends, like we feel sort of slighted because we put in all this work and all this effort to get where we are, and now all of a sudden you could pick the game up and in 3 or 4 days be on the same level as everyone else in terms of gear. And it's just it's not right. And I can go into deeper details, but I think that's a very basic issue with the game. You pull anyone that is out of, or that's in the Dark Zone, you pull them out that wants to get gear. You pull all those people out, and it takes away the very concept of the Dark Zone, which was go in to get gear, take gear from other players, obviously clear landmarks and take gear from there. But you take those players out, and now the only people left are people that want to PvP, and it presents a problem. I understand that the Dark Zone is meant to be a rough place to be. I understand that players are there to kill you if they want and to take your gear if they want, but the problem is they don't want your gear. Those players simply have nothing else to do. And I know for myself, if I'm playing in the group that I play with, we every now and then we'll extract someone's stuff, but for the most part, if we do, it's just to deconstruct it or to sell it and get credits. We don't actually want the gear 9 times out of 10. Partially because it sucks, and partially because everyone's forced into DZ1 and 2, which is where the not so great gear spawns, and that kind of pushes me into the next topic of this video. But that is, again, my first problem, or 1A and 1B of my issues with the game. The best gear isn't in the Dark Zone, which pulls out all the other players that want gear, which then breaks the concept of the Dark Zone because those players that want gear aren't in there, and the people that want to PvP are only going to run into solo players, or every now and then you'll run into a group, but everyone's running the same meta, so it's really not any fun. Where if you had people who were genuinely there and had to stress and worry about getting gear out, it would bring back the fun of the Dark Zone like it used to be. I remember going to get gear, and it used to be stressful, especially as a solo player. Now it is still stressful because you're going to get sentry marked and run up on by 4 people using shotguns, but it's not stressful in the gear because I don't particularly care about the gear. I can go get the gear anywhere. And so that element of fun isn't there anymore in that regard. So the second point I want to get to, as I'm running a little short on time here, but the second point I want to get to is, and again, these points go hand in hand, and this one is no secret to anyone, but the NPCs are too strong. But I want to talk about what problems that causes. The main problem that causes is it funnels everyone out of the stronger DZs, out of DZ 5 and 6, out of DZ 4, 5, and 6, and down into to the lower DZ. And what that does is if there is anyone left in the Dark Zone that wants gear, they're stuck in DZ 1, 2, and 3. Every now and then you'll run into a group that's in DZ 4, but for the most part, they're all in DZ 1, 2, and 3. Well, the problem is, because everyone has been pulled out of the Dark Zone due to the lack of drops, or the lack of quality drops, the only people that are down there are weaker players, newer players, solo players, who can't survive on their own against a 4-man squad, which in today's meta and today's state of the game is very difficult. Back in the day, it didn't used to be such a task. Now it's like, Jesus. So you pull all of those players out, and you leave sort of the scraps, I guess, of, like I said, newer players, solo players, etc., etc. And they're stuck to face people that only want to PvP. But the problem is they're all in the same area. And because those PvP players have nothing else to do, they're going to hunt the other guys, the newer guys, the solo guys. And occasionally you'll get a group that comes in and will challenge them. But the thing is, you can go into the DZ, watch anyone's videos today in the division, and you see everyone is just there. They're just standing around, waiting for someone to go rogue, and a 19-second timer means death in the state of the game that it's in now. You know, anything, people are literally, they see red, they shoot red, and that's it. Going rogue used to be a big deal. You know, people used to, and I won't say honor, but they would at least respect the fact that, hey, this guy's an accidental. You know, let's sort of take it easy. Sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't, but at least you had a fighting chance back then. Now it's like, if you're red, you're going to die, or you're going to be shot at for sure. And I think the very concept of what the game was, both what it was advertised as and what it used to actually be, is just gone now. I know a lot of people I know have sort of given up on the game, and definitely for the time being. I've sort of given up on the game. I'll jump on every now and then and play with some friends, but for the most part, I don't want to play this game. It's pretty broken. It's a waste of time. As I said, you don't need to play in order to progress. You just log in a couple of hours and you'll be right on the same playing field with everyone else, and that's just not a good thing, especially for an RPG. That's the opposite of an RPG. This isn't supposed to be Call of Duty. It's supposed to be an RPG, something that requires strategy and skill and grinding, and it just doesn't do that anymore. So as I said, those two problems I think go hand in hand, and obviously there's a I guess a solution or end game to what I'm trying to get at. But basically it goes like this: the NPCs are too strong, therefore no one is in the higher DZs. The people that are in the lower DZs are usually solo players or weaker groups of people, and they're getting attacked and jumped by 4-man squads who have nothing else to do in the game. I don't personally think the shotgun meta is ruining the game. It's definitely not helping. I don't think it's so OP that it needs to be removed from the game. Definitely needs to be changed drastically, but I personally don't find it too bad because I just avoid those players. And I guess in this current state of the game, that's pretty much all you can do is just avoid them. But those players are all forced into the same area, the same DZ 1 and 2, and everyone is just sort of, they have two different mindsets. The PvP players want to PvP, the PvE players want to PvE, but there's no middle ground where there's gear to sort of distract people and bring back that element of what the DZ used to be. And I think that's one of the main things that's missing. And I think those two fundamental problems are causing a lot of other things to be exposed, like the shotgun meta. If everyone's in the same vicinity, if you're not running into shotgun players at all times, then it wouldn't be as big of a deal, obviously. But because everyone is in the same DZ, it becomes a more prevalent issue. And again, the players that are left there are PvP players who are maxed out on gear, or PvE players who are trying to get gear, but they don't have a group and they're not the strongest. Personal opinions, guys. That's really about all I can say. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know what happened in this video, but apparently I had to go all the way back to evac, and I just logged out. I didn't really care. I just needed some content in the background. But I appreciate you guys watching the video. There'll be more to come as newer games come out. I'm just kind of getting my feet wet again. FIFA will be here, Battlefield, Call of Duty, etc., etc. But yeah, you guys enjoy your day. Like, subscribe, and peace, all that good stuff. Share the video, comment, do all that fun jazz. I really don't care. Peace out, guys.